Today I'm going to be going over how to properly restrain your birds so that way you could assist your veterinarian or be able to properly restrain them on your own at home to check their beaks and their wings as well as their feet to make sure that they haven't hurt themselves, or if they're bleeding, you know how to properly restrain that area to treat it. The one detail that is extremely important when it comes to restraining your birds is understanding the fact that they do not have a diaphragm. When it comes to restraining your bird, the fact that they don't have a diaphragm means that you need to be very careful with the way that you're holding them. If you are restricting your bird's stomach movement or chest movement while you're restraining them, they cannot breathe. Because birds do not have a diaphragm, if you restrict their chest, they don't have the capacity to breathe from lower down like we do. As soon as you stop this part of their body, their chest and their whole region over here from moving, the bird cannot breathe. And that is terrifying. We don't want to do that. So the way that you hold them is very much indicative of the fact that you do not put any pressure on their stomachs. So the first thing I'm going to do here is take my time getting Newt comfortable with me putting my hand over his back and touching him. Newt is comfortable with me handling him, but it's a little different when he comes over for a cuddle versus when I'm just going to flop my hand over on top of him to grab him. So I'm just going to spend the first 5 minutes or so here just showing Newt that my hand coming over towards his back is not a big bad scary thing by just putting my hand towards him and giving him a treat every time he lets me get a little bit closer. And Newt didn't take pretty long, but as I've said, he's pretty comfortable with me handling him already. This was just a good debriefer so he'd be somewhat more comfortable with what's going on here, because I actually haven't really practiced handling him this way in a very long time, and I should practice it more often. So Newt's letting me put my hand over his back now, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to go over 3 basic ways to restrain him today. The first I'm going to go over is the very basic bander's grip. It's called the bander's grip because that's what wildlife people use when they're going out and banding birds to keep track of them and keep track of their populations and watching their migration habits. The way that this restraint works is pretty simple so long as you know where to place your fingers. The 2 most important fingers are going to be your index and your middle finger, because those 2 fingers need to go right underneath your bird's jawline and you need to stretch their neck upwards. The rest of your fingers are basically just pinched close together, just pinning the wings shut and applying a light amount of pressure to the sides of their body. You're not pressing down so hard that you're stopping anything, and you're coming from the sides. You're not clasping your hand down around in front of their chest. The only way that this restraint is going to work effectively is if those 2 fingers underneath their jaw are putting pressure against the neck and pulling upwards. Birds have incredibly long necks, and if you're not stretching that neck out, they're just going to stretch it out when you're not expecting it and flip their heads down to bite you. By stretching the neck out yourself, they can't bend their head down any further to be able to actually bite you when you're restraining them properly. Again, making sure that the rest of your fingers are just nicely tucked to the sides, they're not covering over the chest and preventing your bird from breathing. This is the main basic grip that you're going to use anytime you want to restrain your bird. This is going to be where you start out until you establish where else you need to be going from. From this grip, you can go to try and look inside your bird's beak. The most common way to do this is to hold the bander's grip the way you are right now, just with your 2 fingers under the jaw, the neck stretched out, and then take something like a Q-tip or a little bamboo skewer and just wedge it into the beak to pry it open a little bit so that way you can look inside. I tend to have quite a bit of difficulty with this method. I just find the Q-tip doesn't really open the beak for me, and I'm sure it just has to do with the way that I'm putting the Q-tip inside their beak, and I'm just not good enough at it at this point in time. If you have a bird that is going to bite you hard, I would definitely do the Q-tip, because then your fingers are not near the beak that is going to be trying to bite you. In my case though, I know that my birds are not going to turn around and quickly nip at me and latch on and not let go. So what I prefer to do is actually switch my grip a little bit and have my thumb and my middle finger on the sides of the head, and sometimes have my index finger on the top of the head just to hold the head extremely still so I can use my other hand to go in and look at the beak. Obviously, whatever method you use here is going to come down to the type of bird that you're working with and what works best for you. I find that just using my hands works best for my birds, but for others the Q-tip method might be the better option. Now the last thing we're going to want to take a look at is the wings, and again we're going to start from our very basic bander's grip, and we're just going to rotate the way that our hand is sitting to expose one of the wings. So we're just going to keep all of our fingers nicely curled against the one side and use our other hand to stabilize the body a bit and pull the one wing out. You may find that your bird does better if you give them your pinky finger just to latch their feet onto. A lot of birds do find a bit more stability and a bit more comfort in having something to grip with their feet, whether it be your finger or just giving them a little stick to hold. It totally depends on your bird though. Some will take the fact that they have something in their feet and start to wiggle like mad. So take your own precautions there and establish what's best for your bird with the way that you're handling them at that point in time. So once you've got your grip shift to the side, it's easy enough just to take your hand, hold the wing very steadily, and gently pull it out. If you do not do this very often, your bird is probably going to be wiggling their wing quite intensely, as Newt does repeatedly, because this isn't something I do with him very often. Mia, on the other hand, I do this quite often with, so she lets me pull the wing out really easily. The more you practice at these things, the easier it's going to get for you and your bird, and the more that you take it slow and just do little steps at a time, the more comfortable they're going to get with the whole process, and then the less stressful and the less they're going to want to fight the whole process, because they're going to be enjoying it a lot more because you've practiced it a lot. I do want to note here that Newt's wing is not what a healthy bird's wing should look like. Newt had pretty poor care before he came to me, and as a result his body has some recovering to do. He has a lot of feathers that were grown in while his body was still getting over a poor diet, and so his feathers are falling apart, they're discolored, and they're just not very healthy. Newt is healthy now, and his body is just going through a really heavy molt trying to get rid of all of these severely damaged feathers. This is not what a bird should look like, but it is what Newt looks like at this point in time, as his body is trying to remake all the damaged feathers that he made when he was in poor health. So that is going to do it for today's video. Do keep in mind that you do not want to be touching your bird like this extremely often. Having to handle them this way and manhandle them this excessively puts a lot of stress on their feathers, puts a lot of stress on them. It can create a lot of damage, so you don't want to do it too often. Every single time that you're touching and handling, manipulating their feathers, the oils from your skin can damage the layers of oils on their feathers, so you do just want to be careful how much you're handling them. That being said, there are some benefits to taking the time to adjusting your bird to being handled. Prior to this video, I sat there and took the time to slowly get Newt used to me touching his back and allowing my hand to come down over him. And this is helpful because next time you take them to the vet or have to restrain them, they're going to associate it with positive experiences and they're not going to be quite as stressed out. So taking the time to introduce your bird to these kinds of handling and slowly allowing them to get comfortable with the concept does help with making future instances like they've hurt themselves or they're bleeding and you need to restrain them. It helps with making those things a little bit less stressful. So there are benefits to practicing this. I just wouldn't do it too often because you don't want to accidentally damage their feathers or cause them excessive stress. Just make sure to take it really slow and make sure your birds are comfortable with the process. This grip does work for most birds. Anything that you can hold in one hand, you can easily do this grip on. When it comes to larger birds like your macaws and your cockatoos, obviously your two little fingers under the neck aren't going to do it. That's barely going to hold their head. You generally need two people or you need to use both hands. And it makes it a little bit trickier, but the same concept still applies. Don't compress the chest and keep your fingers or your hand underneath the jawline, lifting that head up as high as you can, and then do whatever else you need to with the other hand. It's a little different when you get to bigger birds, and generally having multiple people does make it easier, but it's the same basic concept. That's going to do it for today's video. Please be safe when it comes to restraining your birds and make sure you are not compressing their chests. It can be very dangerous to do so. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye!